Kupo, 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 Kupo. Yeah, I still got it. Hey Kubos, what's up? Final here today, Final Fantasy, just a little Final Fantasy commentary that I'm gonna do really quickly, or pretty quickly, or not really quickly, but you know what I'm talking about. We're gonna talk about Final Fantasy as we usually do, and today we're gonna talk about side Final Fantasy games. What has happened to the side Final Fantasy games? Now you're watching some Final Fantasy Tactics in the background. Final Fantasy Tactics is probably the biggest side Final Fantasy game ever made in Final Fantasy series anyway. But what happened to the side Final Fantasy games? Now I know that game Bravery Default or something that came out or whatever, but it didn't get a lot of good reviews or anything, and you know, that doesn't really count. I don't know. I don't want to diss Nintendo or anything, but I don't know. I just don't count the Final Fantasy games on Nintendo. I don't know. It's, you know, lately I just can't. I can't do it. I can't play Final Fantasy games on a DS or something. I can't do it. But you know, I guess you can count those as side games. But what happened to the main title, like the main system side games of Final Fantasy? What happened to that? Because there's Crystal Defenders on PSN, and they did that for PS3 about 4 years ago or something like that. And Crystal Defenders is a really good game. And then you got Final Fantasy Tactics that came out years and years ago, which is probably the best Final Fantasy side game ever. But what happened to the side Final Fantasy games? They've been mainly just focusing on the main titles, and they've mainly been focusing on, you know, the 13 series and everything when it was going, and Final Fantasy 15 now, and then Kingdom Hearts 3 and stuff. But what I really think that will bring Square Enix really up back into the gaming industry is a good Final Fantasy side game, a new tactics game. Imagine that. Maybe a new tactics game, or maybe a new Dissidia. Maybe a Dissidia that's on like PS4, and kind of make it like Soul Calibur, Tekken kind of fighting, or Super Smash Bros. Kind of fighting. You know, that kind of fighting that you can do online and do 2-player and stuff and fight each other. I think if they did that for main system and everything, that would honestly blow up. I think that would honestly blow up for all the Final Fantasy community. Now, you can fight people on the city on you know, PSP and stuff, and online and stuff, but sadly a lot of people don't use PSP compared to the main systems like PS3, PS4, Xbox, and Xbox One, and that's the thing. So I really think they should just make a main side Final Fantasy game, either a new Final Fantasy Tactics, which they have been talking about lately. It's a new Final Fantasy Tactics game. They've been thinking of doing it, and they really want to do it actually, and I think they should do it, because when was the last time we got a main system Final Fantasy side, you know, Final Fantasy game? I don't know. I forget. I don't know. Probably the last time is I count Crisis Core as a side Final Fantasy game, so I guess you can call that one, or the Fencing game for Final Fantasy 7. You can either say that one as well, but seriously, it's been a long time since we got a main Final Fantasy side game, if you know what I mean. By side, I mean not including into the main Final Fantasy titles, like, you know, Final Fantasy 10, 12 by the numbers, you know. Side Final Fantasy games are like Final Fantasy Tactics, Crisis Core, Dissidia, all those other games, like those games that are not, you know, going on with the numbers and everything. When was the last time there ever was a good Final Fantasy side Final Fantasy game? I think the last one was probably Crisis Core. I don't look at the Nintendo stuff. I know that they make like kind of like remakes and like free DS stuff for Final Fantasy on there, but I never really see anything good about it, and I don't see a lot of big people or a lot of people picking up those Nintendo games. So I don't count them, I don't look at them or anything, but look, you know, on main system, like Final Fantasy Tactics. Imagine if they redid Final Fantasy Tactics or made a new Final Fantasy Tactics game. That would be awesome. That would be really awesome, because Final Fantasy Tactics, the way how that system worked was basically chess. It was basically like a board game. You know, you had to move your characters right. You had to move your own character right. You got to get in the right position. You always had to time it right. You always had to, you know, it was basically like chess, basically. You had to think a lot in Final Fantasy Tactics. And I think a lot of people like that. A lot of people rather prefer Final Fantasy Tactics than main Final Fantasy games. That's just other people's opinions, and hey, I don't mind. Because Final Fantasy Tactics was a great game. And I think that if they really redid that and made it into a form like just 3D beautiful Final Fantasy Tactics and still have the old feeling of that chess moving characters and everything, I think that Final Fantasy Tactics game would blow up. I think it would bring back the old feeling of Final Fantasy that everybody has been wanting and everything. You know, not, you know, to the people who just, you know, joined the Final Fantasy community because of Final Fantasy 13, you know, you know, respect to them and everything. You know, they love Final Fantasy 13 and everything, but they really just don't know how this community was 4 or 5 years ago, before Final Fantasy 13 Light Returns came out. It was huge. It was honestly one of the biggest it was honestly one of the biggest gaming communities in the gaming industry. So, but now that, you know, not hating on Final Fantasy 13, but ever since Final Fantasy 13 came out, we just been getting slow. So hopefully Final Fantasy 15 can fix that. But for Final Fantasy side games, I want a new Final Fantasy Tactics game. I think Final Fantasy Tactics would be absolutely brilliant. And then I think that Dissidia for main system for PS4, that would be awesome as well. You know, have your Soul Calibur version of Final Fantasy, or Tekken version of Final Fantasy, or Super Smash Bros. Version of Final Fantasy. You know, something like that. I think that would be honestly awesome for Final Fantasy. And, you know, kind of just change up a little bit, but also bring back that old feeling of Final Fantasy that people are really craving for. So, what do you Kubos think? Do you Kubos think that they should do this? Do you think they should make a nice new Final Fantasy Tactics game? Do you think they should make, you know, that Dissidia, you know, game? Or what do you think? What Final Fantasy side game would you want them to make, or even redo? They might even remake, you know, Final Fantasy Crisis Core, or Final Fantasy, the original Tactics, or Dissidia games for the main system. What do you think, and what do you want? What Final Fantasy side games do you want in the future for Final Fantasy, as when Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 is coming out? Because those are the two main games that Square Enix are probably working on, or they are working on right now, is Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3. But on the side, after Final Fantasy 15 and everything, they're gonna have, you know, they gotta take a little break, or not a little break, but they should take a little bit aside and post other Final Fantasy games while waiting for the next, you know, Final Fantasy 16 or something. So, what do you both think? Leave your comments below what you think. what Final Fantasy side games that you want or anything. Honestly, I would want a new Final Fantasy Tactics game just because that game was absolutely brilliant. So much thinking and everything, and it was the better version of chess, basically. that was my chess version of that's my version of chess, is Final Fantasy Tactics. So anyway, Kubos, just wanted to bring back an old version of commentary for my videos, and yeah, hopefully get some more Final Fantasy 15 news, and I will eventually get back to the Final Fantasy 13 Light Returns walkthroughs and everything. Just been kind of slow, and I explained it in my other video, so you can check it out, why I haven't been doing it that much, but probably edit it today and then get it out for you Kubos tomorrow. So anyway, Kubos, enjoy the rest of the Final Fantasy Tactics, and leave your comments below. So anyway, Kubos, hope you enjoyed. I'm Final, and I'm out. Kubo, see ya!
Shut down.